Okay, so let me go on to comparisons of the throughput world and the cost world. So the cost world is all about efficiency. The throughput world is all about effectiveness. There's this guy named Henry Camp, and he came up with something called Camp's Law. It says, when in doubt, choose the less efficient route. Now, I'm okay with you being efficient when you don't have any doubt about it, but in the pit of your stomach, I expect you to know before you screw something up, you're at risk of making a mistake. When you feel that feeling in your stomach, that's when you've got to be more effective. Decide to be effective. Be effective first. You can come back and be efficient later if you want to, but first, do the right thing. What do I mean? Well, in the cost world, we have different areas of the business which we would try to make more efficient. How do we do that? We hire a customer service manager, we put them on top of customer service, a production manager, we put them on top of production, an accounting manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Each one we commend, go make things better. In the throughput world, we don't do it like that. In the throughput world, we see these different parts of the company as one chain of one flow of goods and services out to the customer and that generates the money back that pays for the chain. We're looking at the strength of the chain, not the strength of the individual links of the chain. So to make this kind of make sense for you, here's a situation where we've measured, I don't know how you do this, but let's say you could do it. Let's say God came down and said, this is the percent of capacity that you have. Because I don't know how to measure people's capacity. Do you?
No.
I know that the good people, the really good people, maybe do 6 or 7 times as much work as the really bad people. So I'm on to that. But, it's just, I don't know how to, measure people. But so let's say I've got some celestial power and I can measure each department's capacity. So you can see that we have demand, percentage of demand over here on this side. And here's 100% of demand, and customer service is perfectly suited to fit that demand. Perfect. I have more sales than I need. I got even more production than I need. I got less shipping than I need, and I got more accounting than I need. So that's our situation. So we have those different department heads. I said, go forth and make your department better. So they go forth. At the end of the year, they made the department better. Added 20% to customer service. You can see all the different percentages on the bar charts. And this cost money, right? You didn't get better for free. We got better by spending some money. How much money did we spend? Well, this is the amount of money we spent as percentages of the company's sales. So this is operating expense, or OE, increases as percentage of sales. So we added 1% of sales and 1.2% of sales plus 3% of sales. The total operating expense increase was 7%. Total throughput increase was 11%. Yeah, we won for the year, right? We increased throughput faster than we increased operating expense. This is what we said we wanted to do. This is why people believe in the cost world, because it works. Nothing wrong with it. It works. 7% increase in expenses, 11% increase in throughput. Profit is throughput minus expenses. So since these things are both denominated in percentages of sales, I take the 11 and subtract the 7, and I get 4. I got 4% of sales, new profit. For almost any company, this would be a tremendous achievement for a year. Tremendous. So I'm not saying there's something wrong in the cost world, everybody's in the cost world stupid. I'm saying it works, and that's why people have stuck with it. So now let's take a look at the throughput world. In the throughput world, we look at it differently. We looked at capacity, and we saw that we didn't have enough shipping capacity. So instead of spending 1% to improve shipping, we spent 3% of sales to improve shipping. And instead of improving it 11%, we improved it 33%. Now we have 120% of demand in our total shipping capacity. And we added 20% to customer service to get it up to 120%. Now we have nothing that has less than 120% of our current demand as capacity. Let's say we get lucky and customers like what we're doing and they buy more from us, and the demand increases from 100% to 120%. Well, first off, let's say it doesn't. Let me back up. Let's say it doesn't. If it didn't, then our year is plus 4% instead of plus 7%. And the throughput increase is still 11% because we went from 90% up to 100%, and that was an 11% improvement. So that's if demand doesn't change at all. So then in the throughput world, we would have 11 minus 3, which is?
8.
And is 8 twice 4?
Yes.
So the outcome, if no increase in demand, the outcome to our net profits is not plus 4% of sales, it's plus 8% of sales. Sorry, that was a pop quiz to keep you awake. But if we're lucky and we do a good enough job and we really are excellent, the customers love us and they give us 20% more sales, then this is the situation we have. Plus 4% operating expense, plus 33% throughput increase, net profit goes up by what percent of sales?
29%.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
A lot more, right? This is the power of the throughput methodology. So get rid of those things and let's keep going. What are our priorities? This is another place where we're different. In the cost world, cost cutting is the big priority. XYZ company announced today that they're going to lay off 11% of their global workforce because of the COVID-19 impact. That's what you hear every day, right?
Right.
Unemployment is the highest it's ever been in the state of Kentucky. I just heard that today on the way on the radio. Why did all those people lose their jobs? Because somebody wanted to reduce operating expense in the hope that that was going to make more profitability. And by the way, it does. Except that when you reduce operating expense, what else happens? What do we spend the operating expense for? Do you remember that?
The labor.
Yes, but why? We didn't do it just out of the kindness of our hearts. We're trying to make more and more money, right?
Right. No, we wanted to have the operating expense increase as slower than the throughput.
We did, but what was the purpose of operating expense in the first place? It only has one purpose: to convert
investments into throughput.
Right. So
right.
What we're doing, we're using operating expenses. We're buying capacity to convert investment into throughput. That's the only reason for it.
Right.
So when you fired the people and sent them home and put them on the unemployment rolls, how do you do the work?
Right. You're not going to increase the throughput.
You certainly can't. You're giving up on throughput. Right. And that's why throughput is a vast second. You know, if it's 70% of the time spent working on operating expense, only 20% of the time working on throughput, and almost no time spent working on inventory. How do you know that we don't spend any time working on inventory? Well, I won't give you a pop quiz on this one because this is kind of, supply chain highfalutin. Where do we buy most of our products these days? Manufactured products, simple manufactured products?
From stores.
And where do the companies that put those products in the stores buy those products?
From the manufacturers.
And where are the manufacturers?
Well, we'd like them to be in the U.S., but some of them are over in China.
Yes. And turns out that the United States manufactures more than China. A lot of people don't know that. But still, we're something like 22 or 3% of the world GDP. Right. And China's only about 15%. So we're still substantially bigger than China in manufacturing. But nevertheless, a lot of stuff comes from China. When it comes from China, you have a long supply chain. When it comes from China, you have to have tons of inventory because the changes in demand that can happen in the time it takes China to respond are so great that we've learned to build warehouses out the wazoo to hold inventories of raw materials. So that's something we've done. It's because we don't give a damn about inventory. It's 10%. It's only 10% of our priorities. So if I can get it for a cheaper price in China, I get it for a cheaper price in China. That increases my throughput. And so I care twice as much about throughput as I do about inventory. So I accept the costs that go with the extra inventory, obsolescence, having to throw it away because it goes, spoilage, inventory carrying costs like interest that I have to borrow to pay on that inventory, all that kind of stuff, the cost of the warehouse to put the inventory in, the cost of people to move things around inside the warehouse, all that kind of stuff. So that, but because I have in the cost world twice as much emphasis on throughput as I do on inventory, I do that. But in the throughput world, we put almost equal emphasis on throughput and inventory, and only 10% emphasis on operating expense. So we don't really care about operating expense. Tell me about the throughput. Tell me how I can reduce the inventories. Reduce the inventory gives me cash. Increasing throughput makes me more important to my customers. So there's a quick explanation of the differences there. The cost world wants everybody to stay busy, even if they're just painting rocks out in the parking lot. And throughput often encourages periods of inactivity, which people hate, by the way. This is a thing that's counterintuitive. People hate it, and they hate it, not just because they don't want their boss to come by and see them not doing any work, and maybe I'll get fired. In the cost world, that happens. But they hate it for a personal reason, because when they're sitting there doing nothing, they're not achieving any sort of sense of purpose. And that lack of purpose is what makes people want to work. And this good intention that people have to want to work typically produces inventory, which in the throughput world we don't want. So we want to encourage inactivity, and we got to do something. Maybe we think, maybe we plan, maybe we study. We get better in our off time, but we don't necessarily want to work all the time in the throughput world. All right, special training needed, as I mentioned before, to become a CPA, whatever to understand CPA, but you already understand just from this training the only three things, T, I, and OE. Throughput is the money we get, that we have a chance at, that comes from our sales. Operating expense is the money we spend to change the inventory into throughput, and the inventory is only there to protect the throughput. That's all you got to know. And then the last one is activity-based accounting requires tons of data on every single part of the business. But in the TOC world, you only have to have data on the constraint. The rest of it doesn't make any difference. So only focus on the constraint, the crushingly small amount of data. In the cost world, we have to know the cost to stack one idea up against another idea. In the throughput world, we don't need to know cost to understand the relative benefits. We have to know the delta throughput that's generated minus the delta operating expense that we generate. Not the overall cost, just the change in the cost. And we can make a good decision on any new plan. And the next outrageous statement I'm going to make is that the cost world doesn't always provide accurate results, but the throughput world constantly does. Now, let me back up that outrageous claim, because people have been using the cost world for years. It's been going on since the Industrial Revolution began. And it does produce good results, as we looked at it before in that example where we improved all 5 different aspects, silos of the company. We went up 4%. That was good. The question is, why do we have to work so hard to go up 4%? Why don't we go up 8%?